like soldiers, military men who can come out and say, yeah, this happened, and I had to risk my career to even talk about it.
What would be a satisfying thing then on your bucket list in this regard? I think, like for me, I mean, I'm not aiming big. I'm not necessarily looking for, little green men or first contact or something like the movie Arrival. I think I'd be quite blown away and satisfied with, say, a manned mission to Mars where they find a fossilized microbe or something like that. I think that would blow my mind in terms of, evolutionary biology and the life itself. I mean, what kind of thing would be really satisfying for you?
Boy, I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit more grandiose, I think. What would be huge for me is for them to say we have craft, for the government to actually come out and say we do have craft that have landed here, and that we are working on doing reverse technology experiments, and that's where you got different laser technology or radar technology, or that's how we made the iPhone, different things like that.
Well, I suppose Roswell's the greatest example, isn't it, of where people would say that's already happened. And I'm just wondering, how does the Roswell narrative stand up to your scrutiny? Is that something you find credible, or do you kind of accept perhaps that it was a weather balloon, which is the official narrative?
The reason why I believe Roswell was actually an alien craft was because, again, military type of testimony. There's people that have come across who worked in the military at some of these bases around that time, late 40s through the 50s. And they have said, not like deathbed confession, but old men who just don't care anymore, who are ready to talk about what they've seen. And they've talked about going into these warehouses and saying, yeah, I've been in the warehouses where the wreckage of these craft were, and it fills up the warehouse, and it's these big pieces of metal, but I'm able to go up to it and pick it up with my finger. Like what is that, right? I mean, if it looks like a big piece of metal, it's just a sheet of steel, but you can put your finger under it and pick it up, and it's as light as a feather. That's the type of stuff that makes me feel like maybe Roswell did happen, and it could have been the beginning of you know the secrecy, the reverse engineering technology, where we end up getting the SR-71 Blackbird. The U.S. had the SR-71 Blackbird back in, I think, the 60s or 70s. That thing was done by Skunk Works, the secret division of Lockheed Martin. We didn't even know about it until 20 years after it was created. Even going back, there's so much stuff that's out there, that this technology that we have, that we didn't even know about. You go back to, the raid of Osama bin Laden. We have a stealth helicopter? Like, when
Yeah.
did that happen?
That technology was so advanced. I think they actually downed one of the helicopters in the compound by accident, didn't they? And had to destroy it with explosives so that technology wouldn't fall into the hands of, the Pakistanis.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting.
it's the kind of stuff that just makes you wonder, how much do we have? Where did it come from? And how much of it, what we're seeing in the sky, is ours versus theirs?
It's fascinating. I mean, and just lastly, if you can summarize this in 2 minutes or so, I mean, do you feel that, firstly, do you feel that extraterrestrials have visited this planet? If so, is it a case of they've arrived and they've gone, or do you think there are, governments or agencies or states that actually have a working relationship with these extraterrestrial life forms?
Gosh, it's a great question. You've challenged me to
Just
answer
giving
that
you
in
a
two
minute,
minutes.
just a minute to sort that
Yeah,
out. Good luck,
no,
Stephen.
no problem. Um, I'll point real quick. I do think, yes, they have visited. I do think that there is some type of cooperation. Just my personal opinion on it. And I point to one story real quick with Dwight Eisenhower. Any enthusiast will know what I'm talking about when I mention Dwight Eisenhower, supposed meeting that he had with what was called the Nordic aliens, who look more like Chris Hemsworth, with look, human looking, big, tall, long blonde hair, and also had a meeting with the Greys. And this took place in California in the 50s, to basically come to a deal to say, we get your technology. If we let you do this, here's XYZ, sign on the dotted line, and we can work together. That's been a story that's been about, for decades now. And Eisenhower's, I think it's niece or grandniece, has done interviews about this, and said that it's basically known through their family that actually happened. So I do believe that there was some type of cooperation. Maybe that got out of hand at some point, and we don't know how to handle it anymore. But there's something going on behind the scenes, man, and I'm gonna keep going until I can figure some things out.
Well, Stephen, I've loved speaking to you. This has been great fun and really fascinating as well. Maybe you can just tell people where they can find the UAP podcast and anything else you're working on.
Yeah, sure. Anywhere, any major podcasting platform, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, you can find UAP. Just search UAP or UAP podcast. You'll see it come up. YouTube, TikTok, Twitter at UA Podcast 850. You see there on the bottom. I put a lot of stuff on there as well. I put snippets of the show, things like that. And I just gonna keep doing my best. So see what else comes up over time. And I appreciate the time, Steve. And I've really enjoyed talking to you as well. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. All the best, Stephen. Take care. Thanks for speaking to me.
All right, thank you.
Thoroughly nice chap. It's basically standard when it comes to Stevens, and it's just the way it is. I'm going to bring in our next guest, who I'm sure, even though he's not a Stephen, he's a lovely man himself. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Good, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, entirely. Maybe you could just tell our viewers and listeners what it is you do, what keeps you busy.
Sure. Well, I work as a psychotherapist for my day job, and on the side, I write books and films. And I've been lucky to get my books published by other publishers, Trine Day Press and by Microcosm Publishing. And the first book was Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA War on Musicians and Activists. And the second book was the FBI War on Tupac Shakur, State Repression of Black Leaders. And so I decided to turn those books into films and then produce a third film myself. And so, yeah, that's basically what, and Drugs as Weapons is largely about Tupac Shakur and the Black Panthers. And of course, the FBI War on Tupac Shakur is mostly about the Tupac Shakur, the Black Panthers, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and others.
This is great, and I'm really looking forward to speaking about this with you because it's going to be an education for me. I don't know if you know this, John. It's not immediately clear, given my charismatic demeanor, but I'm not cool enough to be a Tupac fan. I'm not well versed in the old hippity hop, unfortunately, but I am aware of his death as well. His murder, rather. It's become, legend. It's become the focus of many conspiracy theories over the year, and we've had some, massive developments on this in the last few months as well. So I mean, maybe you could just for those people who don't know, give us a brief primer of who Tupac was.
Sure.
And what's the official story of the night of his killing in Vegas.
Sure. So, well, he was born into a family of Black Panther leaders. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was one-time leader of the Harlem Black Panthers. His biological father was a New Jersey Black Panther, and his stepfather, Matulu Shakur, was an acupuncturist who started acupuncture for drug detoxing, and in the Bronx, and it was incredible. It was a great new development for addictions in the country, and he helped spread that use of acupuncture for addictions throughout the country. He also was a co-founding member of the Republic of New Africa, which was founded at Aretha Franklin's father's church in Detroit. It brought together organizers from all over the country, and that group was in solidarity with the Black Panthers, and just had different strategies and tactics, but was similar to the Black Panthers in other ways in their goals. And so he just came from this radical leftist family that and so when he was growing up, he was an intellectual. His mother made him read, punished him by making him read the New York Times cover to cover. When by the time he was 16, 17 years old, actually, he was 17 years old when he was the youngest elected leader of a new group called the New African Panthers. And that group was trying to replicate the Black Panthers. And this was in the late 1980s. And so he was already a national Black leader before he became a rapper. He was already an activist. And so a FBI whistleblower named Wes Swearingen wrote a memoir about being part of the group called the Counterintelligence Program that murderously targeted the Black Panthers. And he said that when activists, raided an FBI office and stole all the files and exposed the FBI's counterintelligence program and their war on leftists in general, anti-war activists as well as black civil rights activists like the Panthers, they were forced to close it down, but they continued under the same thing under different names. And so, and he said that the COINTELPRO, they call it, counterintelligence program, for short, they call it COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO continued at least until the mid 1990s, he said, and that's when, of course, Tupac was murdered or assassinated, you could say. So, Tupac only at some point after around the time of his first album, he decided with his imprisoned activist stepfather Mutulu Shakur to kind of change tactics and pretend to be a gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them. Because really, he was an intellectual who rewrote Shakespeare into modern language, starred in it, produced it in high school. Just a brilliant young man. And so that's why he could write so many songs so easily and put out loads of albums worth of materials before he died at the age of 25, and also publish a book of poetry and star in 6 movies and just write so much, write a screenplay, etc. So by the time he broke into activism, he was targeted. I show in my books and films that he was targeted by the police, at least murderously targeted at least 3 times before he was actually murdered. And so he had this thug life plan, and that's what they called it, to pretend to be a gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them. And this was part of his extended Black Panther family's plan that was succeeding in getting the Bloods and the Crips gangs in Los Angeles to call peace truces and stop fighting for drug turf and fighting each other and starting to fight racism in general and fight, and turn into activism, activism. And so that was spreading throughout California and then spread throughout the country with the help of other activists. A number of Black activists were involved in that spread, including like Harry Belafonte and others. But Tupac was key to that because he would hold gang peace truce picnics and different other events and get these Bloods and Crips leaders to call peace truces. And because he was beloved by the younger generation for his rap and his acting in films, etc. And so that was the hidden kind of Tupac that people don't know as much about. But I talked to his business manager, Watani Tayahimba, who was a longtime mentor, a former Black Panther from Los Angeles. And I talked to his national lawyer, Chokwe Lumumba, who was head of a group called the New African Peoples Organization. And others, close to Tupac to get this information. And so, at the time of his death, he had tried to sober up. He tried to get away from weed and alcohol and was engaged to be married to Kidada Jones, Quincy Jones's daughter. Death Row Records, his record label, though, was highly suspect, and he was trying to leave Death Row Records and start his own his own record label, but his own film production company, etc. He'd already started them actually, and but before he can leave, they held an event. They held a party before a Mike Tyson fight in Las Vegas. They got him drunk and stoned, and he didn't want to do that, but he ended up succumbing to the environment of the party. Got drunk and stoned, and that way they were more easy. It was more easily to manipulate him when a guy they came upon a guy in a hotel lobby right after the Mike Tyson fight, who someone said, "Oh, he snatched a necklace off my neck and threatened me," and so he got Tupac to get involved in a little scuffle with this guy named Orlando Anderson. Filmmaker Nick Broomfield said that he thinks that Orlando Anderson, from all his investigation in his film Biggie and Tupac, he thinks Orlando Anderson was not a gang member, but was just paid a lot of money to take a beating in that hotel lobby. And then after that, he didn't press any charges. He didn't do anything about it. He acted like he wasn't fazed at all. But he did come into a lot of money right after that scuffle. And so so that happened. And then later, of course, Tupac was shot in Las Vegas in a drive-by shooting that the leading police investigator, Russell Poole, said was done by professional hitmen. And they must have used, he thought they used police radios because it was such a professional hit. And he says he came out and he told Nick Broomfield that he believes his fellow officers killed Tupac Shakur in order to, because, and he didn't know why, but he knew that he thought they did. And they ended up killing Biggie Smalls in order to cover up their murder of Tupac. And so he had investigated this for a while. And when he found dozens of his fellow police officers at all level of death row records, he went to his superiors and he said, "What are they doing there?" And superiors thought that they can trust him because he was a white high-level police detective. And they said, "Well, you can call them troubleshooters or covert agents," were their exact words. And covert agents, of course, means that U.S. intelligence were involved. And so highly likely that U.S. intelligence, murdered Tupac or assassinated Tupac because of his activism, because his is getting the Bloods and Crips to call peace truces and turn on to activism also got them away, many gang members away from drug dealing, and that affected millions, if not billions, of dollars of the drug traffickers' money, because they're the street level drug dealers, the gangs. And so that was a major, problem with his activism, besides just his, New African Panther leadership.
Okay, well, there's a lot there to unpack, and I really want to get into the specifics of who you thought murdered him. But I mean, you said something really interesting at the start of the conversation that I wasn't familiar with, and this is like this idea that there had already been 3 violent attempts on his life by the police.
At least 3, yeah.
And can you describe those? Do you have them in your head?
Yeah,
What
sure.
happened?
Yeah. Well, the first one was when he first came out with a solo, album with a major label, and it was his political song "Trapped" started getting